We are all waiting for change. Ask anyone, after some thought, they will tell you about the things they have been waiting for a year, 2 years, or 10 years. At the same time, we are convinced that if the turning point comes, we will not miss it. But what you pursue with all your heart may come in a completely unexpected form, bringing a complete collapse of all foundations and a minor natural disaster. Apart from that, my life story is about this, but it is also about more. My father has always been a very controlling and pressuring person. He is the kind of person who is thought to have two opinions, one is his own, and the other is incorrect. As a child, I usually accepted it. He is a retired former soldier, and there is no mother to raise me. She could not stand his bad temper and ran away when I was 6 years old. I vaguely remember her pointed face, with slender facial features framed by golden hair. My father lived alone for a long time, leaving me to be taken care of by my grandmother when necessary. I believe I owe him everything, so I always obey him unconditionally, even though there is actually no other choice. I really wanted to follow in my father's footsteps and pursue a military career, but at that time, he had already established a construction company and needed an assistant. I gave in again, went to college, and then worked on the construction site for him. Dad always speaks very contemptuously about women, and hearing this from a young age, I drew my own conclusions from his words. Therefore, all my relationships are limited to almost physical needs. I like to meet girls because they are so different from us. Isn't it wonderful that there is such a huge difference between different departments of the same species? There were a few times when I felt ready to fall in love, but always restrained myself. What is this situation now? Interestingly, I once wanted to get married one day, of course, not for emotional connection, but to have children and live comfortably in the family circle. I wonder if any woman would agree to such a proposal, but as they say, the king has spoken, and the king has taken back his words. When I was 20 years old, my father suddenly decided to break his own rules and get married. Before that, he certainly had girlfriends, but marriage was impossible. His girlfriend was a colleague of our company, an accountant. I jokingly called her Aunt Ma. She is tall, but not ashamed of her height, and fearlessly wears high heels to show off. Wearing them, she is even a few centimeters taller than her husband. Coupled with a wide smile like a horse, revealing 32 teeth, perfectly straight, like Snow White's teeth. I decided at the first meeting that among many investment objects, the magnificent image is crowned with a tall, thick brown ponytail. She walks around the office like nailing nails with her high heels, possibly showing off her plump roundness, gracefully swaying her hips. But I was surprised to find that my father noticed her. I was ready to bet that if he had already married, he would choose some quiet mouse, white curls, tall enough, and old enough to be a daughter. I was wrong about everything. Alice, the name of the stepmother, is 42 years old, big mouth, quite confident. From that day on, our lives changed completely. My father said it was time for me to live independently. I had to pack my things and move out of my parents' house. My money, therefore, was greatly reduced, which I needed for a long time. I have been saving money for a long-distance car, and now I have to use the piggy bank. Work is really frustrating. I became absent-minded, and my father often shouted at me in front of everyone. He eventually demoted me to another small mistake, making me do manual labor. The colleagues laughed, which did not add a good mood. Once, during the frame construction of a new house, there was an accident. When the crane was lifting a multi-ton slab, we stood by, waiting to put it in place. Suddenly, a sling broke, and the load began to fall. I imagined what would happen if the slab collapsed and cracked. It would be expensive, and my father would scream again. Meanwhile, the workers cursed like casting some kind of construction spell to avoid disaster. When the slab really fell, I didn't run away like the others. For some reason, I put my hands under it, trying to catch it. Yes, with the palms of both hands to catch 2 tons. I remember the rest is quite vague and rough, just the doctor's words, saying luck, avoiding traumatic amputation, and a few months of plaster. Under the anesthetic, the world is beautiful and amazing. All problems recede into the background. Even my girlfriend at that time came to abandon me. It seems absurd and insignificant, although she is not very valuable to me in real life. My father also appeared. He didn't shout, after all, this is the hospital, but he said disrespectfully about my mental ability and told me in an orderly tone that I would be treated here. This is our recent situation. Nothing big, especially painkillers. When they reduced the amount, I let it go. I started to look carefully at my plastered hands. They are like the claws of Bigfoot, completely unfeeling, and the overall situation is very uncomfortable. I had to use adult diapers, which was to exchange for the nurse. I can't even scratch my nose, let alone others. In such a situation, the idea, not stupid, came to me. I have been looking at the young nurse's high heels, thinking that hands are definitely needed for business, but not the first, although maybe there are these ideas. I just try to protect myself from the doctor's prognosis about losing mobility and saying goodbye to fine motor skills. At that time, my stepmother started to visit me. It was she who brought me the news that my father went to negotiate a golf project for the company, leaving everything to the deputy. Alice brought home food, and despite all objections, she fed me with a spoon and made me happy with interesting stories from work. I didn't notice how I started to communicate quite friendly with her. When I was discharged from the hospital, Alice came to pick me up and took me to them, put me in the nursery where I had lived for 20 years, and she went to work. This evoked a lot of memories, both happy and more sad. Many family issues need to be resolved. I don't want to be like an old grandfather, doing things in diapers, so I resolutely and proudly left them in the hospital for those who need them more. But this did not make my hands move. The first day, I tried to adopt exotic poses to enter the TST toilet. The consequences of these experiments, I cleaned up with my feet. Then I guessed to use the bathtub, but it was not comfortable. I was in agony, but I didn't give up. Alice came home in the evening, assessed the scale of the disaster, and when I went to do things again, she took the initiative to offer help. I blushed, firmly refused, and then ran away. "I will make a slingshot for you and nail it to the floor," the woman shouted behind me, accompanied by her unique laughter. Another difficult task is taking a bath. Of course, you can't shower with plaster. You can wrap your hands in a bag, but just standing under the water flow, I am unlikely to become cleaner. How should I adjust the temperature? I awkwardly asked for help. The lady came, looked at me, blushed, and was sweating all over, and then said, "Listen, Max, don't be a child. I took care of my father for 5 years, he was in bed, in my 50s, I know. Believe me, where men are, we just need to clean you up. That's it. If you want, you can keep your underwear." I nodded silently, and we started. Alice gently wiped me with a towel, then soaped and rinsed me with soap and a rainwater shower. When she touched my back, I found it hard to hold back. It's hard to say, but when you can't scratch yourself for a few weeks, it's a wild ecstasy, and here, gentle female fingers roam along my spine, restoring every muscle and nerve. Fortunately, I noticed in time that I was not the only one. My loyal comrade downstairs took a fighting stance, mistakenly taking the hygiene procedure as a more personal matter. I covered him with my plaster arm and pretended nothing happened. This is how we have been living for a few days. Mom helped me with everything, fed me with a spoon, bathed me, and offered to do all kinds of things for me. One night at dinner, we talked about work, and the topic turned to teaching. Surprisingly, I shared with her my unfulfilled plans. Alice thought for a while and said, "Why do you want to get involved in this remote learning thing? The 21st century is coming. There are all kinds of online courses, schools, which may be much cheaper. That is indeed the solution." I asked her to help me find information, and soon we found a great remote learning program. Once the plaster is off, I can at least press the button and start. I was ecstatic, suddenly hugged her with both arms, clumsily hugged her, and then paused. I stood up, walked away, and tortured myself to go to the bathroom. During that time, I never learned how to do it correctly. I didn't hear the door quietly open behind me until Alice put her hand on my shoulder. "Look, really, it's no problem." She held my hand with her own hand, manipulated it like a bucket, and picked up my surprise device. The surprise made me laugh, but overall, the progress was quite smooth. "And you, Alice, as an accountant, you can be a jeweler or an astronaut, for example, with such skills." We laughed and returned to the room. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the tension caused by not trusting everyone around me for many years, or I suddenly realized that all these problems can be solved safely, or maybe I haven't been touched by a beautiful woman for a long time. But in the room, we suddenly kissed. I wanted to touch my face, neck, and below with both hands, but I had to forget it. The restricted environment added heat to the kiss. Yes, Alice had to take more initiative, but it was easy for her. A few months later, I almost completely recovered and passed the remote training. The first order came in, and I completed them during my sick leave. Alice helped me a lot in many ways, and at night, we enjoyed each other and found new ways to solve problems. On one end, my father came back, I moved out of their place, decided not to go back to my old job. Soon I moved out of my hometown to a bigger city, found a new place to make money, and started dating a girl. This relationship is no longer like the previous one, and I have changed myself. What influenced me? What role did the broken arm play in the equation? Am I ashamed of sleeping with my father's mistress? I try not to ask myself too many questions, just accept life as it is. Maybe you would do it differently. What do you think, dear friends? If you like this story, please share your thoughts in the comments, like or dislike, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you everyone, until the new story.